Hi there, Physics man Fawaz Shafi is back again with a detailed video solution of NEET 2020. Now by detailed video solution I don't mean that I'll be teaching you all the concepts pertaining to all the questions and all the chapters in a single video. I don't even think that's humanly possible. But for that you can subscribe to this channel and press the bell icon because I'll be regularly uploading videos on concepts and numericals pertaining to your school exams, board exams, JEE Mains, JEE Advanced, NEET, etc. Apart from concepts and numericals, to crack such competitive exams, one need to learn time management and many tips and tricks are there. I'll be uploading a video on that also pretty soon. For those of you who has not checked my channel, I've already uploaded a video solution on JEE Mains paper and pretty soon I'll be uploading a video solution of JEE Advanced paper as well. So without any further ado, let's start. NEET 2020 was comparatively easy. There were a lot of direct and easy questions. So expected cutoff marks should be high. Let's read the question. For which one of the following Bohr model is not valid? We know that Bohr model was postulated for hydrogen atom. So first option is anyway out of the question. And it is also valid for hydrogen-like atoms, meaning single electron atoms. So we just have to check whether all these options are single electron atom or not. For example, first one, hydrogen atom, it has one electron. Second option, singly ionized helium atom. Helium atom has 2 electrons, but since it is singly ionized, that means 1 electron has been removed, so 1 electron is left. Deuteron is an isotope of hydrogen, so it has 1 electron. Neon atom has 10 electrons, and if it is singly ionized, 1 electron has been removed, still 9 electrons are left. So Bohr model is not valid for neon atom. This is the concept that is pertaining to this. Question number 2. The ratio contributions made by electric field and magnetic field components to the intensity of electromagnetic wave is. We know that in an electromagnetic wave, there is a sinusoidal variation of electric field and magnetic field perpendicular to each other. Also perpendicular to the direction of propagation of wave. So they should, it's a matter of common sense that they will have equal contribution. But still, if we want to check, we can check by dividing the energy density of electric field and magnetic field. We know the equation for electric energy density of electric field, UE is equal to half epsilon naught E square. Similarly, the energy density of magnetic field is UB is equal to half B square by mu naught. So if I take a ratio of these two, I'll get E by B whole square into epsilon naught, which is already there, and mu naught will come from the denominator to the numerator. We already know that E by B is equal to C, speed of light, and also C is equal to 1 by root of epsilon naught mu naught. So from that we can get E by B is equal to C, and epsilon naught mu naught is nothing but 1 by C square. So if I multiply these two, it will cancel, and finally the answer will be 1:1. Equal contribution by electric field and magnetic field. Let's go to question number 3. The Brewster angle IB for an interface should be. Now this is a question pertaining to polarization. We know that IB is the angle of incidence at which a non-polarized light, if it strikes a transparent medium, it will get reflected as a completely plane polarized light. And we also know a relation that tan IP is equal to mu, where mu is the refractive index of the transparent medium. Here we can understand one thing. The value of mu ranges from 1 upwards. So we can say the range is from 1 to infinity. No object will be having a refractive index of infinity, but still we'll take the range as from 1 to infinity. So if I put the value 1 here, the value of value of IP will be 45 degrees. So that means the value of IP should be greater than 45. So only one option is matching that, it is 3. So tan IP is equal to mu. That means IP value should be from 45 to 90. Let's go to the next question. This is a theory pertaining to that. A cylinder contains hydrogen gas at a pressure of 249 kilopascal and temperature of 27 degrees Celsius. Its density is. Now this is a very simple and direct question based on ideal gas equation. Who doesn't know ideal gas equation? PV is equal to nRT. You learn it in physics as well as in chemistry. Now PV is equal to nRT, but they are asking density. They have asked density. So how do we find density? We can rewrite the number of moles as mass of the gas divided by molar mass. Hydrogen gas, it has a molar mass of 2 gram per mole. So we can rewrite this as PV is equal to m by m RT. Now I can take this capital M on the left hand side and V on the right hand side. So there will be mass by volume, which is nothing but density. So mass by volume is nothing but density. And here you have Pm is equal to rho RT. If I rearrange, rho is equal to Pm by RT, where P is the pressure, M is the molar mass, R is the gas constant, and T is the absolute temperature. Now you just have to substitute it. You have to substitute for pressure 249 kilopascal. So I have written 10 raised to 3 over here. And molar mass is 2 grams per mole. If you convert it to kilogram per mole, it will be 2 into 10 raised to minus 3. Then the gas constant is 8.3. It is given in the question also. And then temperature should be taken in kelvins. So you have to add 273 to it. So that will become 300 Kelvin. So if you calculate, the value will come out to be 0.2 kilogram per meter cube. Now even for calculation, you can easily get it. 10 raised to 3 and 10 raised to minus 3 will get cancelled. Here 8.3 into 3 will approximately be equal to 24. So here you see 24 and 240. See, you need to cancel like this without sitting and wasting time calculating. You have to approximate 24, 249. So it is approximately 10 here. So 10 and this will get cancelled. So it will be 2 divided by 10, which is nothing but 0.2. Next question. A ray is incident at an angle of incidence I on the surface of a small angle prism with angle of prism capital A and emerges normally from the opposite surface. If the refractive index of the material of the prism is mu, then the angle of incidence is nearly equal to. First of all, let's draw the prism. The prism will look something like this. It's a small angle prism, that's why I've drawn the prism like this. But with this, we cannot visualize this carefully. Okay, we can understand one thing. If A is small, angle of incidence is also small for this to go normally to the other surface. If this angle has to be 90 degree, this angle has to be small. That's understood. But anyway, I'll draw an elaborated, exaggerated figure here so that you can clearly visualize this. So here, this is the angle of incidence. It gets refracted through the first surface, and after when it is passing through the second surface, it passes at an angle of 90 degree. So angle of incidence and angle of refraction at the second surface will be 0. Now if we take the geometry into consideration in triangle APQ, we can see that this angle is A and this angle is 90 degree. So clearly this angle will be 90 minus A, because sum of all these angles should make 180. So this is 90 minus A. Now if I take angle APM, what will it be? It will also be equal to 90, because this is normal. This dashed line is normal to the first surface. So angle APM will be 90, and that means 90 minus A plus R is equal to 90. That means 90 will get cancelled on both the sides, and minus A, if you take on the right hand side, you will get R is equal to A. So that's the first thing that you have got here. And again, but we have to find angle of incidence. We don't have to find angle of refraction. We have to find angle of incidence. For that, we'll use Snell's law. According to Snell's law, sin I by sin R is equal to mu by I, mu by 1, refractive index of the second medium to the refractive index of the first medium. But since the angles are very small, I have already told, so sin I by sin R can be approximated as I by R. So I by R is equal to mu, or I is equal to mu R, but we have already seen in the previous slide that R is equal to A. So clearly I is equal to mu A. So the answer is option number 3. Let's go to the next question. Two cylinders A and B of equal capacity are connected to each other through a stopcock. A contains an ideal gas at standard temperature and pressure. B is completely evacuated. The entire system is thermally insulated. The stopcock is suddenly opened. The process is. Now we know that the magic words are suddenly opened and thermally insulated. Because if there is a process happening with thermal insulation, clearly it is adiabatic process. Adiabatic process means where there is no transfer of heat energy. So if it is thermally insulated, clearly there will be no transfer of heat energy. Apart from that, any process that happens very quickly, the temperature cannot change. So the temperature will change and there will be no time for heat transfer. So that's why that is also an indication that it is an adiabatic process. So when the stop valve is opened, the gases will mix and there will be no heat transfer. So it's an adiabatic process. Essential condition for adiabatic process. Energy equivalent of 0.5 gram of a substance is. So clearly they are asking the energy equivalent of a mass. We have to use Einstein's equation, E is equal to mc square. But while substituting, you have to be very careful. This is in grams, so you have to convert it to kilogram. So answer will be 0.5 into 3 square is 9. So 9 into 0.5 will be 4.5 into 10 raised to minus 3 and into 10 raised to 16. So 16 minus 3 is 13. So it will be answer 4.5 into 10 raised to 13, option 2. A body weighs 72 Newton on the surface of the earth. What is the gravitational force on it at a height equal to half the radius of the earth? So first of all, on the surface of the earth, the gravitational force is given as W is equal to mg, or you can also write it as W is equal to g m1 m2 by r square, where m1 is the mass of the body and m2 is the mass of the earth, or usually we write it as small m into capital M. So that is equal to 72 Newton. It's mentioned in the question. This is done. Now at a height equal to r by 2, what will happen? W dash, the gravitational force at this point P, is equal to capital G small m into capital M divided by r plus h whole square. Okay, so h is equal to r by 2. If I substitute that here, then r plus r by 2 will become 3r by 2. 3r by 2 square will become 9r square by 4. But that will go in the numerator as 4 by 9 into g m1 m2 g small m capital M divided by r square. And so this will come out to be 4 by 9 into 72, which already we found out, and that will be equal to 32. 32 Newton is the final answer. The solids which have the negative temperature coefficient of resistance are. So first of all, we know the equation rho is equal to m by ne square tau. Okay, you learn it in current electricity. The resistivity is equal to mass of the electron divided by number density into a charge of electron square into the time taken between two collisions. Now, when you increase the temperature for metals, what happens is the speed of the molecules increase very rapidly, and so the time taken between the collisions decreases. So as T increases, tau decreases. So clearly if this denominator decreases, resistivity will increase. So if resistivity increases, it means it has a positive coefficient of resistance because resistivity is increasing. But for semiconductors, what happens is the number of charge carriers is very low. But if you increase the temperature, more and more charge carriers will go to the conduction band, and so it will contribute to current. And so number density of the charge will increase. This will decrease, no doubt, but the decrease of tau will be less compared to increase of N. So clearly the denominator increases or resistivity decreases. So that's what happens for semiconductors. So alpha which is the temperature coefficient of resistance, is negative. But for insulators also, insulators, they don't conduct electricity at all. But at very high temperatures, the electrons will get enough energy to go to the conduction band, just like semiconductors. So insulators will also start conducting. So we can say the resistivity decreases. But this happens at very high temperatures. That's why people have doubt whether the answer is semiconductors only or insulators and semiconductors. But according to me, since it is not mentioned whether they are talking about normal temperature or high temperature, I would say option 4 is the correct answer. The phase difference between displacement and acceleration of a particle in a simple harmonic motion is. For simple harmonic motion, we have already, you might have already learned that this is the equation for displacement. X is equal to a sine omega t plus phi. If you differentiate it once, you will get a omega cos omega t plus phi, which is the velocity. If you differentiate it again, you will get a is equal to minus a omega square sine omega t plus phi. Now, here cos omega t plus phi can also be written as sine omega t plus phi plus pi by 2, because sine is positive in the second quadrant. So we can clearly write it like this. This is basic trigonometry. Minus a omega square sine omega t plus phi can also be written as a omega square sine omega t plus phi plus pi. Okay. So clearly we see that the phase difference between x and a is pi. Similarly, the phase difference between v and x is pi by 2. But that's not asked in the question. So if we see from the graph also, if we draw the graph, from that also we can clearly understand this. See the graph, here you see at t equal to 0, the graph of acceleration has already gone through a value of pi. So that means the phase difference is pi. Here it's starting, but here you see it already started a pi angle before. Similarly, for just comparison, you can check the graph of velocity. It looks something like this. See, here you can see the cos value. It starts from here, it goes downwards, because cos 0 is 1 and cos pi by 2 is 0. So that's why, see, it is decreasing. But that means that the value, this curve has started from this point. It's already started pi by 2 radians earlier. So that means the phase difference between x and v is pi by 2. Now this is not asked in the question. A screw gauge has least count of 0.01 millimeter and there are 50 divisions in its circular scale. The pitch of the screw gauge is. Now for that we have equations, but I would like you to understand the concept behind this. What is the least count? Least count is, here you have a circular scale. So if I am rotating it by one division, how much does the spindle move? That is least count. That is also the least measurement you can take from the screw gauge. Now, what is pitch? If you are rotating it by one complete revolution, how much does the spindle move? That is pitch. When you rotate it by one complete revolution, you are actually rotating by 50 divisions. So you understand the relation, least count, one division, pitch, 50 divisions. So clearly pitch is equal to 50 times the least count. But we have this equation, least count is equal to pitch divided by number of divisions on the circular scale, or pitch is equal to number of divisions on the circular scale multiplied by least count, which is nothing but 50 multiplied by 0.01 millimeter. Clearly it will be 0.5 millimeter. In a guitar, there are two strings A and B made of the same material and they are slightly out of tune, and it produces beats of frequency 6 Hz. When tension in B is slightly decreased, the beat frequency increases to 7 Hz. If the frequency of A is 530 Hz, the original frequency of B will be. Original frequency means the frequency before the tension in B was decreased. First of all, for beat frequency, we have the equation beat frequency is equal to difference in the frequencies of the two notes. So here we have nu A minus nu B is equal to 6 hertz. But the problem is we don't know whether nu A is greater than nu B, because we want positive value. Beat frequency is positive. So it can be nu A minus nu B is equal to 6 hertz, or it can be nu B minus nu A is equal to 6 hertz. So which is correct? So this question is basically asking you to identify which equation is correct. How can we identify that? You see here, when tension in B is slightly decreased, we have a relation that frequency is equal to 1 by 2 times the length of the string into root of tension divided by mass of the string. Here, tension in B has decreased. So clearly, we have a linear or direct proportionality between frequency and tension. So if tension is decreased, the frequency of B will also be decreased. But when frequency of B has decreased, the beat frequency has increased. So clearly, it has to be this equation. If it was this equation, if nu B decreases, the beat frequency should also decrease. But that doesn't happen, so this equation is wrong. This is the correct equation. Okay, so nu A minus nu B is equal to 6 hertz. Now you just have to substitute. Frequency of A is 530 hertz. So you can substitute 530 here, and clearly we can find nu B. Okay, nu B can be found as 530 minus 6, which is 524 hertz. Option 2 is the correct answer. Two particles of mass 5 kg and 10 kg respectively are attached to the two ends of a rigid rod of length 1 meter with negligible mass. The center of mass of the system from the 5 kg particle is nearly at a distance of. So here we have two mass systems, 5 kg and 10 kg. They have a distance of 1 meter between them, and they are connected by a rigid rod which has negligible mass. So the mass you have to consider is only 5 kg here and 10 kg here. Now we have to find the distance of center of mass from the 5 kg system. That means you can take the x-axis along this and y-axis along this. Y-axis is not at all necessary. And you want to find the distance from the 5 kg. So origin is 5 kg system, 5 kg mass. We have the equation XUM is equal to, XUM means the distance of center of mass from the origin, is equal to m1x1 plus m2x2 divided by m1 plus m2. But we know that mass of 5 kg is at the origin, so x1 is 0. So that means this term will become 0. And 10 kg mass is at a distance of 1 meter. So x2 will become 1 meter. m2 is nothing but 10 kg. m1 and m2 are 5 kg and 10 kg each. So if I substitute, I'll get 10 into 1 by 15, which is nothing but 2 by 3 meters. And it is 0.67 meters or 67 centimeters. It's a very simple direct question. Find the torque about the origin when a force of 3 joules, 3 J cap Newton, acts on a particle whose position vector is 2 K cap meters. So here it's a simple question. Force and the position vector is given. So anyone would just multiply 3 into 2, but the answer you see all are 6 Newton meters. So the direction is also very much necessary. So we have to use the vector equation, which is tau, the torque is equal to position vector cross F vector, R cross F. R vector is 2 K cap meters and F vector is 3 J cap Newton. So if I take the cross multiplication, 2 into 3 is 6, and K cap cross J cap is I cap minus I cap, because you might have seen this table, I cap, and suppose you have J cap here and K cap here, then I cap to J cap, if I cross multiply, I'll get K cap, and K cap cross I cap, I'll get J cap. But the other way around, here we have K cap cross J cap. So if I take a cross multiplication like this, I'll get a negative sign. Okay, so that's what I've got here. But I'll just clear this 1 second. So we have our even if you are not able to remember this equation, we can find it using the coordinate system. Here we see that R cap is along z axis 2 K cap meters. So this is what I've shown, 2 k cap meters. And then force is along the y axis, so 3 j cap meters. So clearly we know that torque is equal to force into perpendicular distance. So this is force and this is the perpendicular distance. So because of that, it will rotate along this circle, and clearly we can see that it is clockwise if you are looking from x-axis, from positive direction of x-axis. So if I apply the thumb rule, right hand thumb rule, I'll clearly get that the direction of torque is this way, and this is negative I cap direction. So 6, 2 into 3 is 6, and the negative I cap I can get from the figure, right hand thumb rule. The curl, then thumb will point in the direction of the vector. Anyway, light with an average flux of 29 watt per centimeter square falls on a non-reflecting surface at a normal incidence having surface area 20 centimeter square. The energy received by the surface during the time span of 1 minute is. Now, if someone does not remember the equation for finding for the intensity or average energy flux, still they could have solved this question by looking at the units. Here you can see watt per centimeter square, and here you see centimeter square. I need energy, so if I multiply these two, I'll get watt, which is the power, and power multiplied by the time will give me the energy. That you can use and you will get the same correct answer. But let's see what is the equation. The intensity or energy flux is equal to energy received per unit area per unit time. Now if I substitute, if I rearrange, I can get energy is equal to intensity into area into time. So just direct substitution. It's not 29, it's a mistake, actually it is 20. So 20 times 20, which is area, times 60, which is seconds. 1 minute is 60 seconds. So if I multiply all these things, I'll get clearly 24 into 10 raised to 3 joules. Question number 16. A spherical conductor of radius 10 centimeter has a charge of 3.2 into 10 raised to minus 7 coulomb distributed uniformly. What is the magnitude of electric field at a point 15 centimeter from the center of the sphere? 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught value is also given. Now here they have told that there is a sphere, conducting sphere, this is important, and the charge is uniformly distributed. 3.2 into 10 raised to minus 7 coulomb charge is uniformly distributed, and the radius of the sphere is given as 10 centimeter, and we have to find the electric field at a point 15 centimeter from the center. Now this 10 centimeter is only given to make you understand whether the point is inside the conductor or outside the conductor. If it was inside the conductor, electric field will be 0 because it's a conductor, but outside the conductor the electric field is as if all the charge is concentrated at the center, and we have the equation electric field is equal to kq by r square. So now it's just direct substitution. K 9 into 10 raised to 9, q, which is the charge, 3.2 into 10 raised to minus 7, and r is 15 centimeter, so 15 into 10 raised to minus 2, and square is there. Now again you can see all the options 1.28 is common, so you don't have to worry about the magnitude or the value, you just have to worry about the order of magnitude. So you can see 9 into 3.2, and here you can see 1 10 raised to minus 1 I can multiply, so I'll get 1.5. So there will be only 1 10 raised to minus 1 remaining here. 1.5 into 1.5 is approximately 3. So 3 gets cancelled. You'll get around 9. So here you see it's around 12.8. So I'll just take it as 12.8 multiplication of, I'm multiplying 9 into 9 times 3.2 divided by 1.5 square is approximately 12.8. Now what is remaining? Here 10 power 9, 10 power minus 7, that will join together to give you 10 power 2, and there is 10 power minus 1 square left. So when it goes to the numerator, it will become 10 power 4, but it was 12 point something, but we want 1.28. So clearly 1.28 into 10 power 4 was already there, it will be 5. So option 2 is the correct answer. Okay, you must learn to calculate so quickly. In a certain region of space with volume 0.2 meter cube, The electric potential is found to be 5 volt throughout. This word is very important, throughout. The magnitude of electric field in this region is, we know that inside a conductor the potential is constant and electric field is 0 there. So in a region where potential is constant throughout, we can say electric field is 0. Also we have an equation, E is equal to minus dV by dr. If V is constant throughout in all the directions, if V is constant throughout, then electric field in all direction will be 0, or we can say electric field is 0. Next question. The increase in the width of a depletion region in a PN junction diode is due to, we know that when the PN junction is formed, there is a potential barrier formed, and if you keep it in forward bias, the depletion region or the potential barrier will decrease, and when it is in reverse bias, the potential barrier will, or the depletion region will increase. So it's a theory, direct question. Option is 2. You can read it. This is the thing about reverse bias and forward bias. A 40 microfarad capacitor is connected to a 200 volt 50 Hz AC supply. The RMS value of the current in the circuit is, we have been given a capacitor, so a capacitor is directly connected to an AC source. This is the VRMS, the RMS value of potential. This is the frequency 50 Hz, and this is the capacitance of the capacitor. We are required to find the current, RMS value of the current. So clearly RMS value of the current is equal to VRMS divided by reactance, capacitive reactance. So we have to find the capacitive reactance, which is 1 by omega C. But this omega you can find by using the frequency. We know that omega is equal to 2 pi f. 2 pi f is equal to 2 pi into 50, which is 100 pi, and that 100 pi I have substituted over here, and C is equal to 40 microfarad. So micro is 10 raised to minus 6, and with that we'll get the capacitive reactance as 100 by 4 pi, or 250 by pi ohm. IRMS is equal to VRMS divided by XC. So I'll just have to substitute that. VRMS is 200 volt and XC is 1000 divided by 4 pi. So the 4 pi will go to the numerator, and finally when you cancel everything, you will get that as 2.5 ampere. Direct question. The mean free path of a gas with molecular diameter d and the number density n can be expressed as. This is a direct equation that they have asked. It's there in any CBSE textbook. The equation is 1 by root of 2 into n pi d square. This one, option number 2. But anyway, I'll just explain how we get that. Mean free path is the average of all the distance it travels between every collision. So molecules, they constantly collide with other molecules. So how much distance they travel, the average of all the distances traveled before or between two collisions, that is mean free path. So what we can do is, so let's say this molecule is going like this and it collides here, and then it goes here and collides, and this is how it passes. So this region, if I straighten it, it will form to be a cylinder, something like this. Okay, it will look like a cylinder over here. Now we know that if the diameter of this molecule is d, okay, and it is moving along this line, it will collide with another molecule if the center of the molecule lies in this region. That means if this cylinder having a diameter 2d, the center lies inside the cylinder, then only it will collide. For example, this molecule, it will hit, but this molecule, it will miss, because when this molecule goes here, it will go this way, it will not hit it. So that's why what we have done is, we have taken this region of radius equal to d, or the diameter is equal to 2d. In this region, how many molecules are there, or centers of how many molecules are there? Only those molecules, this molecule will collide. Okay, so first of all, let's let the number of molecules here be capital N. then number density here will be capital N divided by volume, and that is denoted as small n. So we can get the total number of molecules here, but we want the mean free path. So total distance traveled divided by the total number of molecules will clearly give me the distance traveled between two collisions. So that's what we are going to do here. So here you can see the distance covered in time t. Let's say the distance covered is L. L is equal to Vt. That's the distance covered. But during this travel, how many molecules it will collide? So number of collisions in time t. That will also be equal to number of molecules present in that volume given there. So that can be given as N, number density, into volume. Okay. So number density into volume will be number density into area into this length. So it is clearly number density into area into that length. Length is equal to Vt because it's traveling with a speed v. So in time t it will travel a length L, which is given by Vt. So that L and this L will get cancelled. So finally you are left with 1 by n pi d square. So it's a very simple derivation, 1 by n pi d square. But in the equation, in the final answer, you can see there is a root 2 also. That is because we have assumed that these molecules are stationary, but actually these molecules are also randomly moving around in this body. So experimentally they found that there is a constant 1 by root 2, but it's not a big problem because in all the options that 1 by root 2 is there. So once you have found this, you could have clearly got the option. Again, if you don't know anything about mean free path, you could have solved this question even by dimensional analysis. Just check the dimensions. N is the number density, meaning number of number of molecules per unit volume. So that means this will have a unit of meter raised to minus 3, and this will have a unit meter. So if I multiply meter raised to minus 3 with meter, I'll get meter raised to minus 2, and if I bring it in the numerator, I'll get meter square. But we want mean free path, which is a length. So this option is wrong. Only this option, second option, will be matching if you had used dimensional analysis. So this is the beauty of NEET exam or such competitive exams. Even if you don't know any concept, we could have clearly got the answer by using dimensional analysis. Many students, they skip the first chapter thinking it's a very small chapter, but actually all the chapters, these concepts that you learn in the first chapter can be utilized. Next question. Question number 21. For a transistor action, which of the following statements is correct? Base emitter. Now here, anyone who has a slight knowledge about transistor, they could have easily solved this, because in this options are about doping, about size, and that's all. Okay. So we know that the doping concentration is not same for base, emitter, and collector. Similarly, the size of base, emitter, and collector are also different. So option 1 and option 2 you can clearly eliminate by seeing that. Okay. Now again, there will be a confusion between the biasing. Some people may have doubt in the case of biasing, but this fourth option is clear indication. We know that base will have this, it will be lightly doped and it is the thinnest region. So once you saw this equation, so this option, you could have clearly marked it. So okay, it's clearly question option number 4. You can see the theory about transistor here. Just pause it here and you can read it. Okay. Now next question. Question number 22. A resistance wire connected in the left gap of a meter bridge balances a 10 ohm resistance in the right gap at a point which divides the bridge wire in the ratio 3:2. If the length of the resistance, it's not width, it's wire, is 1.5 meters, the length of 1 ohm of the resistance wire is. So it's a very simple question, direct application of meter bridge. Meter bridge works on Wheatstone bridge concept. Wheatstone bridge, we have learned that P divided by Q is equal to R divided by S. So the ratio at which the length is divided is clearly given as 3 by 2. So we can get R divided by 10 is equal to 3 by 2. So with this rearrangement, you can clearly get R is equal to 15 ohm. So we found for this total length of the wire, the resistance is 15 ohm, and that length of the wire is 1.5 meters. Mind you, 1.5 meter is not the length of this wire. They are talking about this resistance wire. The length of this resistant wire is 1.5 meters. And so 1.5 meter of wire has a resistance 15 ohm. They're asking what is the resistance or what is the length of 1 ohm. Just divide it. 1.5 divided by 15 will give you the 1.5 divided by 15 will give you the meter per ohm of the resistance wire. 0.1 meter, which is nothing but 1 by 10 meter over here. Next question, for the logic circuit shown, the truth table is so and so. Now this is NOT gate, these are NOT gates, and this is NOR gate. So NOT gate, if you give 0 as the input over here, you'll get 1 as an output over here. Similarly, if you put 0 here, you'll get 1 here. Okay. So one way of solving this is you can keep all the options. 4 options are there: 0 0, 0 1, 1 0, 1 1. So you can check for the 4 of them. You can easily get it without wasting a lot of time. But I can tell you a simpler method. You can use the De Morgan's theorem. This is, let's say A is coming here. So what will be the output? A bar. B is coming here. So the output will be B bar. And then A bar and B bar is going into a NOR gate. So if it was OR gate, it would have been A bar plus B bar. But since it is a NOR gate, it will be A bar plus B bar whole bar. Okay. But we know De Morgan's theorem says that A bar plus B bar whole bar is nothing but A bar into B bar, A double bar into B double bar. Now we can say A double bar is nothing but A and B double bar is nothing but B. So this is nothing but an AND gate. So this entire thing, compresses into an AND gate. So you know the truth gate of an AND gate. We can directly select that. It is clearly option A. Okay. Light of frequency 1.5 times the threshold frequency is incident on a photosensitive material. What will be the photoelectric current if the frequency is halved and the intensity is doubled? Now again, here frequency is halved is a very important thing, but the intensity is doubled is only given to fool you people. Okay. Now what happens, you will see the frequency of the light was 1.5 times the threshold frequency. We know that if the light is incident at a threshold frequency, then electrons will be emitted and there will be photoelectric current. But if the frequency is less than the threshold frequency, there will be no emission of electrons, there will be no photoelectric current. So that is what happens here. Next time the frequency is halved, so nu dash is equal to nu by 2, and nu we already know that it is 1.5 nu naught, so it will be 1.5 nu naught divided by 2, which is nothing but 0.75 nu naught, less than nu naught. So it is less than the threshold frequency, and so no photoelectric current will be present. So it doesn't matter if the intensity is doubled, there is no photoelectric current. So answer is 0. Next question, when a uranium isotope 235 uranium 235 is bombarded with a neutron, it generates krypton. Along with krypton, there are three neutrons, and then what? It's a direct theory question. This is the reaction that happens in a nuclear reactor. If someone remembers that, that's well enough. They can clearly answer it as 1. But if someone does not remember that, then also they could have written the equation like this, and they could have checked the number of protons. Number of protons should be same in both the cases. So clearly 92 plus 0 is 92. And here it's 36 plus 0 plus some x. So this x, if you equate, you can clearly get it as 56. And there is only one option which has number of protons is equal to 56. That's option 1. Similarly, you could have checked the number of nucleons. 235 plus 1 is 236. 89 plus 1 plus 144 will also give you 236. Question number 26. The energy required to break one bond of DNA is 10 raised to minus 20 joules. The value in electron volt is nearly. Can you get an easier question than this? They are just asking you to convert from joules to electron volt. We have a relation that 1 electron volt is equal to 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19 joules, because 1 electron volt is the energy required to accelerate 1 electron through 1 volt of potential difference. So if I calculate that, it will come out to be this, and now you have to convert it. So 1 in place of joule, I'll write 1 electron volt divided by 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19. So you just have to divide this by 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19 and you'll get it in electron volts. It's a clear calculation. You don't require to calculate. You can clearly see it from here that it is 0.06 electron volt. Next question. Two bodies of mass 4 kg and 6 kg are tied to the ends of a massless string. The string passes over a pulley which is frictionless as seen in the figure. The acceleration of the system in terms of acceleration due to gravity G is. So if I draw the free body diagram of this, I can clearly see that there will be mg acting downward where mass is 6. So it will be 6g acting downward. Here also I can see 4g acting downward. There will be tension in the string and all, but to avoid bringing in tension and all, if I move this to both the sides, I can redraw it like this. So I can clearly see that 6g is acting to the right, 4g is acting to the left. If I move it like that, and then we can see that it will be accelerating together because it's constrained to move together. So we can get net force is equal to mass, total mass into acceleration, and acceleration is equal to net force divided by total mass. Net force will be 6 minus 4g. Similarly, the total mass will be 6 plus 4, which is 10. So if I calculate, I'll clearly get it as g by 5. Some of you may be thinking we can use the equation directly. Yes, this equation is derived in many of the textbooks. You can directly use it, no problem. If someone has forgotten that equation, still they can use it. Do it like this. If someone does not understand this method, they can do the free body diagram separately for both the masses, and then they can eliminate tension to find the acceleration. Question number 28. A wire of length L, area of cross section A, is hanging from a fixed support. The length of the wire changes to L1 when the mass capital M is suspended from its free end. The expression for Young's modulus is, so clearly you want to find Young's modulus, and Hooke's law states that Young's modulus is equal to stress divided by strain, or from Hooke's law you actually are getting stress is directly proportional to strain, and from that the proportionality constant is Young's modulus. So Young's modulus is stress divided by strain, which is nothing but stress is force over area. So what is the force acting which is trying to elongate this? It is the weight of the mass. So mg is acting downward, mg is the force, divided by area, that will be the stress, divided by strain is elongation divided by original length. Elongation means the L1 minus L, that is the elongation. So clear answer you are getting, no stress about it.
The average thermal energy for a monoatomic gas is Kb is Boltzmann's constant and T is the absolute temperature. Now it's a direct question. Everyone knows that it is equal to 3 by 2 kBT. But if someone doesn't know, they can make use of the equation that you get from equipartition of energy, where it says that every single degree of freedom has 1 by 2 kBT of average thermal energy. Now if I take the monoatomic gas along XYZ, if I take it at the origin, now it can have translatory motion along X, along Y and along Z. And since it is a monoatomic gas, the rotational aspect wouldn't be very much. So we can say it has a translatory motion along X, along Y and along Z. So that means it has 3 degrees of freedom. And we know the equation is the energy is equal to F by 2 kBT, where F stands for number of degrees of freedom. For monoatomic gas, there are 3 degrees of freedom, so it will be 3 by 2 kBT. Which of the following graph represents the variation of resistivity rho with temperature T for copper. We have already seen a question of this sort where we understood that the alpha value, which is the thermal coefficient of resistance for conductors, is positive. That means the graph should be sloping upward, or it should have a positive slope. So it can be either A or C. B and D are eliminated as it is sloping downwards. Now among A and C, people may think that it is A because we have learned an equation rho is equal to rho naught into 1 plus alpha delta T, which is a linear equation. So people may think it is this graph, but actually uh, that's an approximate equation that can be used for certain small range of temperature. If, for example, here you can see if I take a very small range of temperature, it is almost linear, but the actual equation has many more terms. So actual graph should be option C. It's actually a graph which is there in your NCERT textbook as well. The color code of resistance is given below. The values of resistance and tolerance respectively are. Now in color coding, you might remember that first two colors represent the numerals, and the third one represents the multiplying factor, fourth one represents the tolerance. Now we don't have to worry about the first two colors because all the options have 4, 7 in the beginning. So we just have to worry about the multiplying factor. We know the mnemonic. B.B. Roy of Great Britain had a very good wife. It starts from black and ends in white. So in between you have brown, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, gray, and then at the end white. Now the multiplying factor for brown will be 10. 10 raised to 1, which is 10. So clearly it will be 4, 7 multiplied by 10, which is 470. But there is kilo ohm here, so option 1 is wrong. Option 2, 3, all are wrong. Option 4 is correct. You don't even have to check about the tolerance because only one option matches with the resistance value. So clearly the answer is 4. In Young's double slit experiment, if the separation between the coherent sources is halved and the distance of the screen from the coherent sources is doubled, then the fringe width becomes. We know the equation for fringe width, beta is equal to lambda capital D by small d, where lambda is the wavelength of the coherent sources and capital D is the distance between the screen and the coherent sources, and small d is the distance between the coherent sources. Now we have seen that the distance between the coherent sources is halved. That means d dash will become capital small d by 2, and then capital D dash will become 2d because the distance from the screen to the coherent sources has been doubled. So this small d, so this 2 will go in the numerator, and you will get 4 lambda capital D by small d, which is nothing but 4 beta. So clearly the fringe width will become 4 times the previous one. The capacitance of a parallel plate capacitor with air as medium is 6 microfarad. With introduction of a dielectric medium, the capacitance becomes 30 microfarad. The permittivity of the medium is. Now we know the equation for capacitance is epsilon naught A by D, and that is if air is the between the parallel plates. Now if a dielectric is introduced, the equation will become C dash is equal to K epsilon naught A by D, K or kappa. So this stands for dielectric constant, also known as the relative permittivity. So we can see that previously it was 6 microfarad. So C is 6 microfarad, but C dash will be 30 microfarad. So if you equate, you'll get kappa is equal to 5, which is dielectric constant is 5. But we want the permittivity of the medium, which is epsilon. Epsilon is equal to epsilon naught into epsilon r or kappa. And clearly epsilon naught is 8.85 into 10 raised to minus 12. It's given in the question also, multiplied by kappa, which we just found. So the answer will come out to be 0.44 into 10 raised to minus 10 coulomb square per Newton per meter square. So option is C. Dimensions of stress are, see, it's a very simple question because stress is force by area, and we know the dimensional formula for force is ml t raised to minus 2. F is equal to ma, mass times acceleration. So mass, acceleration, L t raised to minus 2 divided by area. Area has a dimension of L square. So this will become ml raised to minus 1 t raised to minus 2, which is a very simple dimensional formula. Remember, this is also the dimensional formula for pressure. Assume that light of wavelength 600 nanometer is coming from a star. The limit of resolution of telescope whose objective has a diameter of 2 meter is. Now, what is resolution of telescope? If the telescope is able to view 2 points from the star separately or distinctly, then we can say that it has completely resolved the 2 points. But if the 2 points, the bright fringe formed by the 2 points are merging together, then we'll see a blurred image, and we can say it has not, the telescope has failed in resolving these 2 points or these two images. So this is the figure. Here you can see that this is the telescope resting at on a point at Earth, and these are the 2 points which are viewed by the telescope. When the images formed by these two telescopes here, they are just resolved if the bright fringes formed by the image are seen separately. That means the first minima of one image lies at the bright or the central maxima of the second image. Now this is the equation for the limit of resolution. The angle, the small angle between the 2 points d theta should be equal to 1.22 into lambda by capital D, where lambda is the wavelength of the light that is coming from the star, and capital D is the diameter of the objective lens of the telescope. So it's just a direct substitution, 1.22 into lambda, which comes out to be 600 nanometers. So it will be 600 into 10 raised to minus 9 meters divided by 2 meter is the diameter of the objective lens. The answer comes out to be 3.66 into 10 raised to minus 7 radians. An LCR circuit is connected to an AC voltage source. When L is removed from the circuit, the phase difference between the current and the voltage is pi by 3. If instead C is removed from the circuit, the phase difference again is pi by 3 between the current and the voltage. The power factor of the circuit is. Now, we know how to draw phasor diagram of LCR circuit, but in this case, the capacitor has been removed. I have only shown the phasor diagram for inductor and resistor. Okay, so VR is the resistance, VR is the potential difference across the resistor, and VL is the potential difference across the inductor. So if the bottom portion is removed, so that means the effective potential difference will be V1, and it makes an angle of pi by 3 with current. This is current. Okay, now again in the other way, if the top portion is removed, that means inductor is removed, then the phasor diagram will look something like this at the bottom. So again there will be VC, which is lagging the current by pi by 2, and this is the potential difference across the resistor, and the angle made, the phase difference between the resultant EMF and the current will be pi by 3, as it was in the previous case. Now here you can see that these two triangles, this triangle and this triangle will be similar to each other. So we can clearly say that this side is equal to this side because the angles are same, and there is a common side. So clearly we can say this side is equal to this side, or we can say VL is equal to VC. With that we can get that inductive reactance is equal to capacitive reactance. So this is the condition for resonance. In case of resonance, if inductive reactance is equal to capacitive reactance, we can say that total impedance of the LCR circuit is equal to the resistance of the resistor. So with that condition, we can clearly get that the power factor, which is cos phi, which is given by R by Z, is equal to 1, because R is equal to Z. So the power factor is 1. So option 3 is the correct answer. A short electric dipole has a dipole moment of 16 into 10 raised to minus 9 coulomb meter. The electric potential due to the dipole at a point at a distance of 0.6 meter from the center of the dipole situated on a line making an angle of 60 degree with the dipole axis is. So we have a direct equation to find the potential at any point near a dipole. First of all, this is the dipole and this is the dipole moment, and this is the position vector from the center of the dipole, and this angle theta is the angle made by the position vector with respect to the dipole moment. Now if that is the case, we have the equation V is equal to Kp cos theta by R square. So it's a direct substitution. K is 9 into 10 raised to 9, P is 16 into 10 raised to minus 9, and cos 60 is half, then R is 0.6, so R square is 0.6 square. If you calculate, 10 raised to 9 and 10 raised to minus 9 will get cancelled. 16 by 2 will make 8, then 0.6 square will give you 0.36, and accordingly if you calculate, and this will become 1 by 0.4, and accordingly you will get the proper answer. It will be 10 by 0.4, and accordingly you will get the answer. So answer will come out to be 200 volts. But there is another method. If someone does not remember this equation, what you can do is you can take the component of P along R and perpendicular to R. So this is Px and this is Py. For Px, this point lies on the equatorial line, and we know that the potential due to a dipole in an equatorial line is 0. For Py, this is an axial point on an axial line whose potential is given by Kpy by R square. But Py is equal to P cos theta. So if I substitute that, I will get Py is equal to P cos theta, or V is equal to Kpy by R square, and again you will get the same equation, and answer will be 200 volts. Next question. An iron of susceptibility 599 is subjected to a magnetizing field of 1200 ampere per meter. The permeability of material of the rod is mu naught is equal to 4 pi into 10 raised to minus 7 Tesla meter per ampere. Now we have to find the permeability. Permeability is mu, and mu is equal to mu naught into mu r. But we have a relation mu r is equal to 1 plus psi m, where this is the susceptibility psi m 599. So you just have to add 1 to that to get mu r, and easily we can get permeability of the material as mu naught into this value. This value of magnetizing field is just an additional data. It's not required. So clearly 4 pi into 10 raised to minus 7 into 600 will give you 24 pi into 10 raised to minus 5. Okay, but we want 2.4 pi, so it will be 2.4 pi into 10 raised to minus 4. Option A is the correct answer. A long solenoid of 50 centimeter length having 100 turns carries a current of 2.5 ampere. The magnetic field at the center of the solenoid is, so this is a solenoid of length L. There is a current passing through the solenoid. It is producing a magnetic field, and there is a direct equation that you learned. B is equal to mu naught Ni, where mu naught is the permeability of free space, and N is the number density of the turns, number of turns per unit length, and I is the current passing through that. But here they have given the number of turns and length separately, so you just have to divide it, and clearly mu naught is 4 pi into 10 raised to minus 7, and the number of turns is 100, and the length of the solenoid is 50 centimeter, so it will be 50 into 10 raised to minus 2 meters, and current is 2.5. If you again calculate, it will come out to be 6.28 into 10 raised to minus 4 Tesla. A charged particle having drift velocity of 7.5 into 10 raised to minus 4 meter per second in an electric field of 3 into 10 raised to minus 10 volt per meter has a mobility in meter square per volt per second as. Clearly the equation for mobility is, what is the definition of mobility? It is the drift velocity or increase in the drift velocity produced by unit electric field. So that means mu, which is the mobility, is equal to Vd by E, drift velocity divided by electric field. So you just have to substitute and you'll get the answer very easily. Now if someone does not remember the equation, again they can use the dimensions or the formula to get the equation. Not formula, the units to get the equation, because you have meter per second for speed, drift velocity, and electric field is volt per meter. So in order to get meter square per volt per second, we have to divide drift velocity by electric field. The quantities of heat required to raise the temperature of two solid copper spheres of radii R1 and R2. R1 is equal to 1.5 R2 through 1 Kelvin are in the ratio. So here they are talking about the heat required to raise the temperature, which is given by Q is equal to MC delta T. So Q is equal to MC delta T. But if I substitute, if I write it separately for both the copper spheres, I can write it as Q1 is equal to M1 C delta T and Q2 is equal to M2 C delta T. Now we see that the specific heat will be same for both the materials are copper, and the temperature raised is also same, 1 Kelvin. So that's why I have not written a subscript of 1 for these two quantities. Now I want the ratio of Q1 to Q2. If I take the ratio, it will come out to be M1 by M2. But the masses are not given. The radii are given. So what we can make use of is mass is equal to density into volume. And the density will be same again, it's copper material. So density will get cancelled. Volume, the ratio of volume, again volume is 4 by 3 pi r cube because it's a solid sphere. 4 by 3 pi r1 cube divided by 4 by 3 pi r2 cube. 4 by 3 pi will get cancelled. So you will be left with r1 by r2 whole cube. And r1 by r2, if you look at it, it will be 1.5 or 3 by 2. So R1 by R2 whole cube will be coming out to be 3 by 2 whole cube, which is 27 divided by 8. An electron is accelerated from rest through a potential difference of V volts. If the de Broglie is actually pronounced as de Broglie wavelength of the electron is 1.277 into 10 raised to minus 2 nanometer, the potential difference is, it's a direct substitution. We know that the equation for de Broglie wavelength is 1.227 divided by root V nanometer. So we just have to substitute the value of, we have to find the V. We just have to substitute the value of lambda here. So the equation will become root V is equal to 1.227 divided by the lambda. And we can see here it is 1.227, it's a mistake here, into 10 raised to minus 2 nanometer. The nanometers will get cancelled, so 1.227 will also get cancelled, and you will get 10 raised to 2. So root V is 10 raised to 2. So V is equal to square of that, which is 10 raised to 4 volt. Option D is the correct answer.
Taking into account of the significant figures, what is the value of 9.99 meters minus 0.0099 meters? It's a very simple subtraction. So we know how to subtract two values. You have learned it in kgs. But after subtracting, even though you get this value 9.9801, what we have to take care is the number of decimal places in the final answer should be equal to the least number of decimal places in the quantities which we are subtracting. So here there are 4 decimal places. Here there were only 2 decimal places. These zeros we have added in order to subtract it. So these are only 2 decimal places. So the final answer should also have only 2 decimal places. So that is 9.98 is the correct answer, option B. A ball is thrown vertically downward with a velocity of 20 meters per second from the top of a tower. It hits the ground after some time with a velocity of 80 meters per second. The height of the tower is. It's a very simple question from the kinematics where you use v square is equal to u square plus 2as. We have been given the final velocity and the initial velocity. So initial velocity is u and the final velocity is v, and the distance between them is h. So now we can directly substitute, but while substituting we have to take care that 80 square is equal to 20 square plus 2 into minus 10 should be written, because the sign convention is every quantity that is upward is taken positive and the quantity that is downward is taken negative. Similar, that means here also I should have taken minus on both the sides, but since you are squaring it, it doesn't matter. So here minus 10 and in again minus h, because displacement is also downward. So you'll get h is equal to 6000 divided by 20, which is 300 meters. A capillary tube of radius r is immersed in water and water rises in it to a height of h. The mass of water in the capillary is 5g. Another capillary tube of radius 2r is immersed in water. The mass of water that will rise in this tube is. First of all, we'll find the equation for the capillary rise, which is given by h is equal to 2 rho cos theta by r 2 sigma cos theta by r rho g, where sigma is the surface tension and r is the radius of the tube, rho is the density of water, and g is the acceleration due to gravity, and theta is the angle of contact. Now they have given all the values. Okay, now since the material has not changed, I mean it's still the water, only the radius of the tube has changed, so we can say that sigma, theta, rho, everything remains same. So if I take the ratio of these two, I'll get the ratio as r by r dash, which is given as 1 by 2, because the r dash is 2 times r, so it will be coming out to be 1 by 2. But why are we finding this? We want the mass of the water that will rise in the tube. So mass can be written as density into volume, and if you take the ratio of these two, you will get that density gets cancelled, only volume, the ratio of volume will be there, and volume is nothing but pi r square h, because it's cylindrical region, so it's pi r square h, and we know that r has also changed and h has also changed. So substitute the values. You can see that r dash is 2r, so here you will get 2 square, which is 4 in the numerator. Similarly h dash is 1 by 2h, so there will be 2 in the denominator, so finally the ratio will come out to be 2. So the answer, now this is the ratio of the masses, m dash by m, but m has been given as 5g, so if I cross multiply, I'll get m dash is equal to 10g. So with that, we have completed the entire video solution of NEET 2020. I hope you have liked this video. If you have, please let me know by pressing that like button, and also subscribe to this channel for more updates. I'll be uploading a JEE Advanced paper, solution of JEE Advanced paper very soon. So keep following, and please share this with all your friends and family, and let me know in the comment section also what are your feedbacks of this channel, and what improvements I can make to make the channel better. So until we meet again, it's goodbye from me and happy physicsing.